In May, an article published in the journal Antiquity contrasted the symbolism and architecture between the pre-Pottery Neolithic A site in Jordan called WF16 and the famous Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, amongst other places, to see if there were any shared cultural motifs at that time between the north and the south of Southwest Asia. In this video, I discuss the intriguing evidence and conclusions outlined in this paper. The Neolithic Revolution is a simple term for a complex process that took place around 10,000 years ago, as the world emerged from the Younger Dryas and entered the geological epoch known as the Holocene. It refers to the transition from a hunter-gatherer way of life to fixed settlements centered on agriculture, where both plants and animals were domesticated. This was a hugely pivotal point in humanity's history because with agriculture came craft specialization, social hierarchies, non-portable art, and further technological innovation. All of this paved the way for the first civilizations. Evidence for the earliest agricultural settlements comes from the Fertile Crescent in the Near East. The ideas then spread both east and west through the movements of people. Although both plant and animal domestication probably took place in several locations simultaneously, there are a few early examples worth mentioning which have been identified through archaeobotanical and zooarchaeological research. Evidence for wild cereal cultivation has been found around the Middle Euphrates and southern Levant. Legumes, fruits and nuts were exploited in Iran and Iraq, and goat domestication took place in the Zagros Mountains. For a long time, it was thought that the social organization required for megalithic building projects and elaborate art was brought about by the Neolithic Revolution. However, the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in 1994 changed all that. This ancient megalithic complex of circular enclosures and intricately carved pillars was built by hunter-gatherers. So it's now argued that the symbolic and ritual life of hunter-gatherer groups was actually the impetus for agricultural evolution. The professor of early prehistory at the University of Reading, Stephen Mithen, who is one of the authors of the paper I'm going to discuss, has argued in several publications that feasts at Göbekli Tepe requiring large quantities of wild cereal may have led to the accidental domestication of these plants. Plenty of evidence has been found over the years for feasting at Göbekli Tepe, which supports this hypothesis. In the paper, the authors discuss how Göbekli Tepe probably functioned as a seasonal meeting place for groups of hunter-gatherers from different locations. Such gatherings would have been essential for human reproduction, food security, and social cohesion to prevent conflict. The seasonal nature of these meetings would have enabled groups to maintain their identities whilst at the same time exchanging ideas that caused them to progress in similar ways. Other large sites in Southwest Asia, such as Karahan Tepe, Jerf el Ahmar, and Jericho, were probably gathering places as well. Ethnographic research of modern-day hunter-gatherers has led experts to challenge the assumptions about small, mobile groups of foragers in the ancient past, and to instead conclude that large-scale social networks over big geographic distances existed. As a result of these gathering places and modern-day ethnographic research, the authors of the paper suggest that social connections in Southwest Asia during the late Epipaleolithic and Pre-Pottery Neolithic A may have existed over vast geographic distances. They analyze a number of sites which provide evidence that a social network may have stretched 1,200 kilometers north to south and 800 kilometers east to west. WF16 is a site next to the Wadi Faynan in southern Jordan dated to between 9,800 and 8,200 BCE. It was first discovered in 1996 and is made up of semi-subterranean oval structures. Plenty of evidence for plant and animal domestication was found during excavations, along with craft specialization, such as a workshop for the making of beads. WF16 has a large building with an amphitheatre layout labelled as Structure 075. During excavations, many bird bones, raptors specifically, were discovered there. It appears that the building was used for seasonal gatherings, most likely in the spring and autumn, following the capture of buzzards. The bird skins, feathers, and talons were then used as parts of costumes for rituals and ceremonies that took place inside Structure 075. It's possible that this meeting place was not just for the local community, but for people from further afield. The type artifact of the Pre-Pottery Neolithic A is the El Khiam lithic points. Their geographic distribution is another piece of evidence for social connections. They have been found at places as far apart as Jebel Qatar, Göbekli Tepe, Hatula and Lafat. However, although the lithic points found at these locations all belong to the same category, each place used slightly different techniques to produce them. This shows shared technology but regional variation. Large regular blades also vary in the techniques used to produce them, with those in the Middle Euphrates being different to those in the southern Levant. The authors point out that new finds constantly change our understanding of chronology and direction of movement. Obsidian, which originates from different places in Anatolia, has been found at a number of pre-Pottery Neolithic A sites in the southern Levant, including Jericho, Netiv Hagdud, and Iraq el-Dub. It's been suggested in the past that WF16 was an exchange hub for obsidian, malachite, bitumen, marine shells, greenstone, and worked copper ore. The marine shells found there originated in both the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. So a tantalizing picture begins to emerge of a trading hub and a ceremonial meeting place whose social connections may have stretched pretty far. The distribution of tools and raw materials at ancient sites, as well as evidence for production techniques, help experts to understand the movement of people and the chronology of technological development in the ancient past. As discussed, there's a lot of evidence for the connections between people over vast distances in Southwest Asia during the late Epipaleolithic and the Pre-Pottery Neolithic A. However, when it comes to the exchange of symbolic imagery and ideological concepts in the region, evidence has been limited. A connection between the North and South is suggested by mortuary practices such as the removal of skulls, but it hasn't been so easy to find similarities between art and architecture. Several researchers have pointed out that similar ideological concepts can be found throughout northern Mesopotamia at the beginning of the Holocene, but such symbolism and construction techniques do not seem to have been present in the southern Levant. The authors of this recent paper have been able to challenge this dearth of evidence by analysing certain features of WF16 in Jordan. Within the amphitheatre-style building at WF16, there are internal benches which are similar to those found in the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe and in the communal building labelled as EA53 at Jerf el-Ahmar. Zigzag designs are a feature of these benches at WF16 as well as at Jerf el-Ahmar. These designs have also been found on slabs which were part of a bench in building B2 at Tel Abra 3. Cross-hatched, zigzag, wavy and parallel lines found on stone vessels and plaques at WF16 are similar in appearance to those which appear at Tel Caramel, Tel Abra 3, Göbekli Tepe and Halan Kemi, which are all in the north. A monolith found within a niche at WF16 is reminiscent of the much larger megaliths found at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. Although small, it stands out because no other monoliths have been found at pre-Pottery Neolithic A sites in the southern Levant. Snake symbolism is abundant in early Neolithic sites from northwestern Syria to southeastern Anatolia. It appears on different kinds of artifacts and structures in both realistic and abstract forms. At WF16, a cylindrical stone was excavated which appears to have bas-relief carvings of snakes. Of course, it also needs to be mentioned that even if there is shared symbolism, it doesn't necessarily mean the symbols meant the same thing to the same people. As mentioned earlier in the video, raptor bones found at WF16 suggest that the feathers and talons were used for costumes. Raptors are also depicted at Göbekli Tepe, Jerf el-Ahmar and Tel Abra 3. Their bones have been found at Zawi Kemi Shanida, Jerf el-Ahmar and Halan Kemi. Animal and human sculptures at Göbekli Tepe showing prominent ribs may be symbolic of death. They seem to show partially defleshed humans and animals. At WF16, a stone carved with zoomorphic imagery has vertical lines on it, which may also indicate exposed ribs. In a recent video, I talked about another carving like this, which was found at Karahan Tepe. They're quite creepy sculptures, actually. The carving of a gazelle at WF16 is similar to that found at Abu Huraira in the Middle Euphrates Valley, once again showing a correlation in zoomorphic symbolism between north and south. A rather interesting find from WF16 is a small stone face, which has a similar style to one from Jerf el-Ahmar in the northern Levant more than 800 kilometers away. It's interesting because the carving of a human face found at the earlier Natufian site of Nahal Ain Gev is geographically much closer but has a totally different style. This could indicate a cultural connection between these pre-Pottery A Neolithic communities in spite of them being hundreds of kilometres apart. There are a few differences though, but the authors of the paper suggest that could mean local cultural expression of a shared idea. Phallic symbolism is a prominent feature of sites in the northern Levant. 3 standalone phalli have been excavated at Göbekli Tepe, for example, and there are clear depictions of sex in both animal and human figures. WF16 is the only pre-Pottery Neolithic A site in the southern Levant to have phallic depictions, and these appear both schematically and realistically. One carving also has red ochre covering it. A pointed stone artifact referred to in the paper as a baton was found in a semi-subterranean structure at WF16. An analysis of its base shows it would have originally been inserted into a haft. Nothing similar has been found in the southern Levant so far. However, it is comparable with artifacts from Murubet in northern Syria and Gusa Huyuk in southeast Turkey. Fragments of similar artifacts have also been found at Halenkemi. I did a video last year on the modified skulls from Göbekli Tepe. These were incised along their sagittal crests, and one had a perforation on its left parietal. A human skull with a perforation was also found at WF16. Rather intriguingly, the distribution of skull fragments in structure 045 suggests it had been smashed when the roof collapsed, which means it was originally on display. So there's a possibility rituals involving human skulls also took place there. At Kortik Tepe on the upper Tigris Basin, more than half of 407 human skeletons were found with paint on them. Evidence shows they were covered in gypsum plaster mixed with paint. Paint was also present on human bones at Demirkoy and Hasankeyf Huyuk, which was probably transferred to them from whatever they were wrapped in. Human remains at WF16 have traces of black pigment on them, as well as gypsum plaster and the imprints of textiles. This suggests they were wrapped. The use of pigment and plaster to cover human bones can also be found at the earlier southern Levant late Epipaleolithic site of Nahal Ain Gev II. Pigment, which appears to be from painted wrappings, was also found on skeletal remains at the late Epipaleolithic sites of Azrak 18 and Shubaika 1. So the treatment of skeletal remains appears to have involved similar practices at all these locations. I only recently came across this paper and other work of Stephen Mithen, and it's all really rather interesting. Firstly, the idea of cultural connections across such a vast area of Southwest Asia, just as the Neolithic Revolution was getting underway, it's fascinating to consider. Secondly, I wonder about the nature of those connections. To what extent were these people meeting, exchanging, and sharing? Thirdly, I'm curious if shared symbolism and shared architecture means shared ideology. This paper is open access, so if you're interested in reading more, the details are in the description below. I've also put the link to a video by Faynan Heritage where archaeologists Stephen Mithen and Bill Finlayson discuss the site of WF16. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my video. A big shout out goes to my patrons and channel members for your continued support. Don't forget to hit the like button, and I'll see you next time.